Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. The reporter who wrote the article in 1897 with regard to the crashed UFO and dead alien occupant, he did a terrible job. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed finally. It's just something that just really occurred to me. Not only did he do a bad job, other people did a bad job at the time too. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of that on April 17th in 1897, in the small little Texas town of Aurora, something crashed. It was reported two different articles in two different newspapers, and a being was actually discovered. A dead alien being was discovered and buried in a cemetery. But in my previous podcast, I was talking about how when the cover-up, the actual government cover-up with regard to UFOs and extraterrestrials started. I believe it started on July 8th, 1947, because of the Roswell crash. Well, I had received a message from one of the guys from the one YouTube channel that I always talk about, UFOB, and he pointed out that there were other crashes before that, and he mentioned the Aurora, Texas crash. But I did talk about this before, and I just think that people just didn't. It seemed to me that it's very possible that the people there just didn't understand how big of a deal this really was. But there's other aspects too that I never talked about before, and I think it's time to talk about them now. Basically, after this event happened, there was an article that appeared in the Dallas Times Herald, and this was in April of 1897. After this event happened, and here's what the article states. It says, "A windmill demolishes it. Aurora, Wise County, Texas, April 17th. About 6 o'clock this morning, the early risers of Aurora were astonished at the sudden appearance of the airship which has been sailing through the country. It was traveling due north and much nearer the earth than ever before." Well, I'm going to just stop there for a second. Of course, at this time in 1897, there was a lot of sightings of what people were calling airships. So that's what they're talking about there. So it's not like they weren't expecting something. In a way, there was so many different articles and all over the country, at that time about these airships. But anyway, continuing. It says, evidently some of the machinery was out of order, for it was making a speed of only 10 or 12 miles an hour and gradually settling toward the earth. It sailed directly over the public square, and when it reached the north part of town, collided with the tower of Judge Proctor's windmill and went to pieces with a terrific explosion, scattering debris over several acres of ground, wrecking the windmill and water tank, and destroying the judge's flower garden. The pilot of the ship is supposed to have been the only one on board, and while his remains are badly disfigured, enough of the original has been picked up to show that he was not an inhabitant of this world. Mr. T.J. Weems, the United States Signal Service officer at this place and an authority on astronomy, gives it as his opinion that he was a native of the planet Mars. Papers found on his person, evidently the record of his travels, are written in some unknown hieroglyphics and cannot be deciphered. The ship was too badly wrecked to form any conclusion as to its construction or motive power. It was built of an unknown metal resembling somewhat a mixture of aluminum and silver, and it must have weighed several tons. The town is full of people today who are viewing the wreck and gathering specimens of the strange metal from the debris. The pilot's funeral will take place at noon tomorrow. And then the author's name is under it, S.E. Hayden. Now, S.E. Hayden actually did a very nice job of depicting the simplicity of what happened here. I mean, there's a lot of details here. So he did a great job on this. Unfortunately, the story just went away then. After it was not only in that newspaper, but there was another newspaper that it appeared in too. It was, according to an Alien Agenda written by the late investigative reporter Jim Mars. In that book, in the introduction, there's a section where he talks about this Aurora crash, and he talks about that there was a similar story that was published in the Fort Worth Register But in this account, it did not mention the hieroglyphics and stated simply the pilot, who was not an inhabitant of this world, was given a Christian burial in the Aurora cemetery. So there were 2 articles that appeared, and then the story just goes away. I mean, that's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that happened, but it did, and there's actually proof of this. I mean, the proof in 1973, some UFO researchers, including Mars and the late Bill Case, were found out about this incident, and not only that, but that there was still the grave of the alien being still existed, and there was a headstone there that had a carving of the spaceship on it. That was there since 1897, since this thing died. So there was actually evidence to back this whole story up. And somebody ended up stealing that original headstone, and it was never found. And also, apparently, there was some of the metal from the craft was actually buried in the grave with the alien. And actually, Bill Case in 1973 had a metal detector, and he determined that there was metal there. And of course, the alien's body, but if there was any remains left, still might have been there too. But not long after this became a big story in 1973, the headstone got stolen, and also somebody snuck in the middle of the night and poked holes in the ground and used some sort of a vacuum to suck all the metal and whatever else was down there up. So that's what happened there. So, but the whole thing, and I did talk about this before previously, I know at least a couple of times, about how had this been a bigger thing in 1897, then there would have never been a cover-up. It would have been a known fact that there's an extraterrestrial presence, there's alien worlds, and this would have been known for since the 1800s. Imagine. But people dropped the ball. I mean, to me, I think this really happened because of the proof, the fact that there was a grave for this being. These people that ran this cemetery association in 1973, when this became a big story, they actually guarded that cemetery every night because they didn't want anyone to go digging up that grave. That was unholy. You can't do that kind of thing. And could you imagine? I would imagine that the same kind of people back in 1897 would have felt the same way, and they wouldn't allowed some phony the construction of some phony grave, right? There are actually some people out there, skeptics, who will say that really this was the reporter was just trying to get some attention to this little town. They wanted to try to get a train to go through it to make it a bigger town so it would grow. And they wanted the train to come near it, so they put this story together to try to seduce some railroad baron to run his tracks by Aurora. Now, I don't think I believe that story, because why would you're not going to convince some holy Christian cemetery association to put up a phony grave of an alien being in the cemetery to attract a railroad company. That's something that's just not going to happen. That's a crazy idea. The whole idea that a town would do something like that, create some fake story, a hoax, just to try to get a railroad to come by their town. I mean, that's just, I don't believe that, particularly because there's no way that devout Christians that were living there at the time would ever allow something like that, would ever put create a phony grave in their cemetery to put some pretend alien being as part of some big lie. I just don't see that happening. So I don't believe that. To me, it really happened just because of the fact that there is a grave there. However, when this was brought up to me yesterday, or just recently, yesterday I think it was, by one of the guys from US UFOB, it was brought up to me, and I responded, and I said. That was one of the things he mentioned. And I said, I have talked about Aurora before, and I believe what happened is that nobody in the scientific world saw the article. Or if they did see it, they probably didn't believe it. The military at that time wouldn't have cared. The writer of the article, meanwhile, wasn't smart enough to contact any scientists. He wrote the article, but there was no attempt on the reporter's part to get comments from scientific authorities. I was a reporter for 13 years. Actually, it was 14. I thought about that last night after I wrote. I already sent it. It was actually 14 years that I was a reporter. There is no way a good reporter could be blind to an incredibly big story like this. Also, the editor of the paper didn't do his job either. Why weren't there follow-up articles? Why weren't reputable scientists contacted? The Aurora case might be the biggest journalistic blunder of all time. Yes, I do believe that. I think that you could look at this and say this is one of the biggest journalistic blunders of all time. Because, if you're running a newspaper and a story like this comes in, you're going to want to contact some other people, right? Or actually, if you're the editor of a newspaper, let's start with the editor. The editor sees a story like this. Hey, wow, an alien being crashed, and he sees the article and he sees that there was some astronomer contacted, and that's all he thinks. Oh, that must be enough. So I guess there's nothing we could do. We'll just throw the story, and it's not that big of a deal. I just can't imagine that somebody who was the editor, whoever handled this article was completely dense, not doing their job. They should have been contacting the reporter and having him go try to talk to other scientists to alert them to this. There should have been like professors from colleges and stuff showing up in Aurora. There really should have been. They didn't do their job. This reporter did not do his job. He should have known that this is a giant story. The fact that there's a man from outer space basically has died here. It seems like the way this whole thing went down, it's like the whole opinion of everyone's like, when this happened, it seems like, well, poor guy from outer space he crashed and now he's dead. Nothing we can do. I guess we just take him up to cemetery and bury him, give him a Christian burial, and then just move on with our lives. Nothing we can do. It seems like that's the whole attitude that everyone had at the time. It's like they acted like there was nothing they can do. All we can do is bury this, and we move on with our lives, and there's no big deal here. And that's sad. It's unreal. I do think it's true that obviously this article, even though it appeared in two different newspapers at the time, it's 1897. So it's very possible that some people who saw it, maybe they thought it was a joke, right? Maybe some people looked at it and said, I don't believe that. That's too fantastic. That must be a joke, and just completely dismissed it. There could have been some scientists that did that. And maybe there was a lot of other scientists who just never knew about it. And who's this guy who was the astronomy expert? Like, you would have thought, okay, this Mr. T.J. Weems, he's the United States Signal Service officer at this place and an authority on astronomy. He gave it his opinion that it was a native of the planet Mars. Like, why didn't this T.J. Weems, why wasn't he like contacting somebody? Like if this guy has fancied himself as an authority on astronomy, you would think that, okay, he would realize, this Mr. T.J. Weems, he would have understood at the time that this is big news and I need to contact some people, right? You have to wonder, why did it happen? Maybe he did and nobody wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Maybe it was just no, we don't want to look at that. Or maybe T.J. Weems just thought it sounded too incredible even to him, and he just felt like if he tried to tell somebody this, maybe they would think he's totally crazy. Who knows what really happened? But it seems like somebody really dropped the ball in Aurora in 1897. I would have to start with the reporter, though. I think that he did a good job giving the laying out what happened and the facts and basically the end game that was buried in the cemetery. Okay, he did a good job there, but he needed to go a little bit further. He even had an expert. He even had the authority on astronomy, T.J. Weems, to give him a comment and give him inform him that it's a person from Mars. But why didn't he contact other people? Why didn't Weems contact other people? Why did not the editor of the newspaper not do more? There needed to be more done at the time, because obviously at that time there would have been no interest by any military in the world of trying to reverse engineer this. And I just think it would have been pretty much accepted, and it wouldn't have been tried and covered up. There would have been people who would, after a little bit, would have been like up in arms about it, like saying a lot of religious people out there who this would go against their religion. So I think some people would be up in arms about it. Not everybody, but some. We would have been over this hump already if these people had done their jobs, especially like S.E. Hayden. As a reporter, you can't drop the ball like that. This guy dropped the ball. He did a good job with the initial report, But there needed to be at least one follow-up. I mean, this is the biggest story of all time. How could it not have been? It's just funny, like, that it was published in two different newspapers. Each story is a little bit different than the other one. Some things changed around. And here's another thing. These stories were, you look at these old newspapers from back then, right? These stories are squeezed in there, really. And not only that, so a lot of times when you write an article, when I was a reporter for 14 years, when you write an article, a lot of times the editors will chop, sometimes a good third out of it. So there might have been even more information that was reported that was in this original story that never made it to print, and we don't even know what that is. Could have been other very interesting information that we don't have, and that's very possible because the articles were a little bit from each newspaper. In the one newspaper was slightly different. It was slightly cut up, but not as long as the other one, and it was they moved some things around, and that's how editors operate. So it actually would have been editors from two different newspapers when you really think about it. Editors from two different newspapers completely failed on this whole story. How could they not have seen how big this story was? How could they not have been trying to reach out to scientific organizations, colleges, universities to find out, get some smart people in and hey, they're saying that this is a man from Mars. You better check this out. I mean, this should have been a big thing at the time, but a bunch of people dropped the ball, and they just acted. They acted for the most part indifferent. That's what it seems like. It seems like everyone seemed indifferent because, as far as they were concerned, well, he's dead. There's nothing we can do. Well, hey, we'll take him up in the church cemetery there. We'll give him a Christian burial, and we'll all just move on with our lives. That's what it seems like.